Welcome to the Workflow Podcast. If you enjoy this show, please like, share, and or subscribe. And now, on with the show. Hello and welcome back to the Workflow Podcast for the fourth episode of Season 3, which is all about personal productivity and how we go about optimizing it and how we go about getting past all of the blockers and things that get between us and our best work. So today I'm going to get into the R in the spare tires slowing us down. And the R, if you recall, stands for residual work. And another way to think about residual work is working past the point of diminishing returns. And if you're as old as me or older, you would have watched Forrest Gump at least once, probably more like 4 or 5 times by this point, and you'll probably recall a certain scene where Forrest is essentially playing college football, gets the ball, initially runs the wrong way, his team's telling him, no, run the other way, and he runs, gets the touchdown, and he just keeps on running. He keeps on running, he knocks out a couple of members of the marching band, and he runs straight on through into the change rooms. And what good old Forrest has essentially done there is he has run well past the point of diminishing returns. And when you think about the way we go about work today, oftentimes we can find ourselves doing the exact same thing, working well past the point of diminishing returns. Now, this could show up, say, working on a PowerPoint presentation where, there's an old joke that has been making its way around the consulting community for years, and that is that we spend 10% of time putting together a presentation, and then 90% of the time essentially formatting it, moving little widgets around PowerPoint, adding shapes, turning the shapes in all sorts of different angles until we find the perfect angle. And essentially that's an example of working well past the point of diminishing returns. Another one could be, you put together an article of some kind. It might take you 3 hours, and then you spend 10 hours going over it and going over it and going over it and reading it again and going over it some more. And when really the value's already been delivered, it's good as it's going to get, and you tweaking it just a little bit more isn't going to make one iota of difference. And the reason we do this is because once we get to that point of diminishing returns, the work becomes a lot easier. You've already done the hard work, and the hard work is something we try to avoid. We're evolutionarily programmed to pick the lowest hanging fruit. And so once we've worked on something, once we've delivered the value, we're in our comfort zone now. Let's just chill out here. Let's just tweak this article. Let's just tweak this presentation. Let's just go over things a billion times. Let's try and fool ourselves into believing that we're actually doing work right now, but really we're just being busy. We're just getting busy being unproductive and wasting our time. We're far better off in that situation to go off, do something else unrelated to work, to go and have a rest, go for a walk, or move on to another activity where our time is actually going to create some value, another more difficult activity that is going to require us to perhaps get into the flow state, for example. Now, if you are on the YouTube, you can see a chart up on the screen, which effectively captures perfectly the difference between high performers and everybody else. Now, high performers or high producers tend to stop much earlier on this bell curve than everybody else. So high producers will stop once the majority of value has been delivered, whereas most people keep on working well past that point, and they're essentially on the other side of that bell curve when they've stopped working. So you can think of, say, a bell curve with, say, standard deviations mapped on it. So the high producers will stop working at the end of on the left side of the one standard deviation section of the graph, whereas everybody else will stop working on the right side of that one standard deviation. Now that could be the difference between you spending 2 hours on an article and spending 4 hours on an article. Now, if you do that with everything, then effectively it's going to take you twice as long to get stuff done. Now, I'm just talking arbitrary numbers here. It could be much worse than that. Now, to counteract this, being conscious of when you've reached that point of diminishing returns, being really objective and honest with yourself, and just cultivating the ability to notice that point. And once you get there, just stop. As easy as it is to keep working on that, just stop and move on. Work on something else or go outside and just do something unrelated to work. That's going to be a much better use of your time than sitting there mindlessly staring at the screen, not the screen, flipping circles and triangles and shapes around in your PowerPoint presentation for hours on end in some cases. Now, when we get better at identifying the point of diminishing returns, you will find that you'll get so much more work done, only because, Parkinson's law, which I've touched on previously, if you get 10 hours to do something, that's how long it'll take you. If you get 2 hours to do something, that's how long it will take you. So this kind of this concept of stopping at the point of diminishing returns ties in very well to Parkinson's law and ties in very well to things like time blocking, where you say give yourself 2 hours to work on a specific task, and at the end of that 2-hour block, the task should be done and you stop and move on to whatever is next in your daily time block calendar, rather than just say giving yourself an indeterminate amount of time to get something done. Well, that's just going to invite you to spend a lot more time on that task than you should. But we will talk about time blocking in a separate episode, because it is such a important topic and one that does deserve its own episode. So this was a very short episode of the Workflow podcast. Next, we'll be turning to the path of least effort. So tune in for that one. Until next time, hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Peace out.